Yeah, I signed for the loan in her name. She won't know the difference. I froze inside the fitting room, recognizing John's voice on the other side of the thin wall. He was laughing, telling his mistress how he'd fooled me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I pulled out my cell phone, activated the voice recorder, and with a terrifying calm, stepped out to face them. One word, and his face went white as a sheet of paper. Eleanor Vance walked through the bustling shops at Willow Creek Mall, her steps slow, as if moving through a dense fog. It had been a particularly grueling day at work. She'd spent the morning buried under a mountain of paperwork, followed by 3 hours of relentless customer complaints. Lunch brought the news that the accounting department had, yet again, botched the numbers. Her head throbbed, her shoulders ached, and all she yearned for was to be home, kick off her heels, and collapse onto the sofa. But on her drive home, she remembered her trusty trench coat, a companion for the past 4 years, was beyond repair. The sleeves were frayed, the lining split, and the once dark green color had faded into an unrecognizable mess. I need to buy a new one, Eleanor thought, turning into the mall entrance. She wasn't usually a fan of shopping, especially on a Friday evening when the aisles were packed with tired people rushing to beat closing time. But today, for some reason, she felt like treating herself. Perhaps it was a premonition, or perhaps just the sheer exhaustion of her monotonous life. Work, home, work, home. John, her husband, had been completely withdrawn these last few months. He came home late, answered questions with monosyllables, and disappeared on weekends, claiming it was either a fishing trip with the guys or a guys' night. Eleanor had always chalked it up to stress. His job was demanding, and John had always been a quiet man anyway. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, it was warm and bright, smelling faintly of coffee from the nearby cafe and fresh pastries. People hurried back and forth with shopping bags. Children wove between the displays, and soft instrumental music played somewhere in the background. Eleanor pulled her phone from her purse and checked the time. 6:30. She figured she still had enough time to pick out a coat and get home by 8. She rode the escalator up to the second floor, where the clothing stores were located. She walked past the athletic wear, past the denim shop, and stopped at a boutique she'd seen many times but never entered. In the window, a mannequin wore a stunning navy blue coat, cinched with a thin belt. It looked expensive, yet tastefully understated. Eleanor stepped inside. The air smelled pleasantly of new fabric and a light perfume. The displays sparkled under soft lights. Coats, jackets, and trenches of every imaginable color and style hung on the racks. She stopped at a sharp black coat with a wide collar. "Good evening. Can I help you find something?" A young sales associate approached her, a friendly smile on her face, her hair neatly tied back. "Good evening. I'd like to try on a coat, something classic for everyday wear." "Certainly. What size do you wear?" "A size 10. The associate nodded and disappeared between the racks. Eleanor walked along the display, examining the models. "This one's too bright. This one has a fur collar, not practical. And this brown one." No, she didn't want brown. It reminded her too much of the old one. "Here, take a look." The young woman returned, holding 3 coats. "This is a classic navy model, very elegant. This gray one has a belt, and here's a black one with an interesting cut. See how the shoulder line is slightly dropped? It looks very stylish." Eleanor took the navy one. The fabric was pleasant to the touch, heavy but not bulky. The color was deep and rich, the kind that wouldn't fade or dull after a couple of seasons. "The fitting rooms are right over there." The associate pointed to a row of stalls in the back of the store. "If you need another size or want to see more models, just call me." "Thank you." Eleanor walked toward the fitting rooms. 3 stalls stood side by side, separated by thick, muted, beige curtains. The first one was occupied. A muffled woman's voice could be heard on a phone call. Eleanor went into the second, hung the coat on the hook, and started taking off her jacket. Soft instrumental music played in the store. She slipped out of her jacket, hung it next to the coat, straightened her blouse, which had gotten a little wrinkled during the day, and slipped the new coat over her shoulders. She buttoned it up. The material was soft and fit her figure nicely. She looked in the mirror. It sat well. The shoulders were right. The length was perfect. She turned sideways, evaluating the silhouette, maybe a little loose at the waist. Or was it just the way she felt after a tiring workday? Then a man's voice, loud, satisfied, and containing a familiar cadence Eleanor would know anywhere. came from the next fitting room, the one where someone had been on the phone just moments ago. Stop it, baby. It's fine. I'm telling you, she won't figure it out. Eleanor froze. The hand that was reaching to unbutton the coat stopped halfway. It was John, her husband, here in the next fitting room, in a women's clothing store. Her heart hammered somewhere in her throat. Her pulse roared in her ears. Did I imagine it? No. She knew that voice too well. She had lived with him for 8 years, heard him every day, every morning, every night. She would recognize it even through a wall, even in a crowd. Why are you worried? John continued, clearly talking to someone right next to him. The loan is done. The money's already on the card, under her name, naturally. My credit is trash after that car incident, remember, but Eleanor's is spotless, clean as a whistle. The bank didn't even really check the documents, just for show. They called once, confirmed the details, and that was it. The money was transferred. A cold chill spread through Eleanor's body. Her fingers went numb, her breath hitched. She slowly sank onto the small poof in the corner of the fitting room, staring blankly at the curtain separating her from her husband's voice. A loan in her name. What is he talking about? What loan? Come on. John laughed, and his laughter held such a careless, confident note that Eleanor felt sick. The signature. I told you it's all covered. She won't even find out. You know how she is. She doesn't look at paperwork. She trusts me with everything. I slipped her a few documents to sign, told her they were some forms for my job. So, she signed them without looking. The bank doesn't care, as long as the signature is there and the ID matches. A woman's voice responded softly, indistinctly. Eleanor couldn't make out the words, but the tone was flirtatious, playful, a young voice, not hers. Don't worry, sweetheart, John continued, and Eleanor heard the rustle of clothes as he moved. We'll be in Cancun in 2 weeks. Imagine that, 5-star all-inclusive. I already picked out the package. Just got to pay for it. And Eleanor can think I'm on a business trip. She's used to it. I tell her I'm traveling every month. Last month I said I was gone for a week, and we were at the resort. Remember? He laughed again, the satisfied, carefree laugh of a man sure that everything was going according to plan, that no one would expose him, that he was smarter than everyone else. Eleanor sat motionless. Her mind was empty, not even thoughts, just a kind of white noise like static on an old television. A loan in her name, without her knowledge, a forged signature, a mistress, Cancun, the Atlanta trips that never happened, the Miami conferences she knew nothing about. She remembered how John had indeed left for a week a month ago. He'd told her they had an important meeting, that his boss required his personal presence. She had even walked him to the door with his bag, kissed him goodbye, and said, "Be safe on the road," and he was heading to the beach with this woman. "How much did you end up getting anyway?" the woman asked, louder this time. Eleanor heard her voice clearly, young, sharp. She was definitely under 30. $45,000, John replied. For 3 years. The payments are small, only $1,500 a month. Eleanor won't even notice. I'll just take her debit card and transfer the money to the bank. I'll tell her it's for utilities or something else. She never checks. $45,000. Eleanor closed her eyes. The sum spun in her head. Unbelievable. $45,000. A loan she hadn't taken. A debt she didn't know about. But what if she finds out? The woman's voice held a note of anxiety. What if the bank calls her, or she gets a text? She won't, John said confidently. I gave them my cell number when I signed the papers, so all the notifications come to me. And she doesn't go to the bank herself. I told you about 3 years ago I'd handle all the bills so she wouldn't have to worry taking care of her. Right. She loves having such an attentive husband, and I quietly control everything. Her card, the accounts, all the finances. How much time had passed? Seconds? A minute? Eleanor didn't know. She sat staring at the floor, unable to move. Somewhere far away, music played. Somewhere, shoppers bustled. But here, in this small fitting room, her world was crashing down. Then, something clicked inside, sharp, like a switch being thrown. And in place of the paralysis, came icy clarity. A cold, sober thought. I have to record this. I have to document what he's saying, or he'll deny everything, twist it around, lie his way out. Eleanor slowly pulled the phone from her purse. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them to obey. She unlocked the screen and opened the voice recording app. A large red button was in the middle of the screen. She pressed it. The phone vibrated once. The recording began. Black screen, running seconds, a pulsating red circle. She placed the phone on her knees, screen up, and froze again, listening intently. Every word was now vital. "Well, that's great then," John was saying. "So, we're all set. I'll stop by your place tonight. Eleanor's stuck at work until 9 o'clock. Something about inventory or an audit. I forget. We can relax, have some wine, watch a movie, and first thing tomorrow, I'll go to the bank and transfer some of the money to my account, and it's a done deal. Some for the vacation, some for the dress and shoes you wanted. Remember?" "I remember." The woman laughed. "You promised to buy them for me a month ago. Well, we'll buy them tomorrow. We'll buy them right now. We have plenty of cash now." Eleanor clenched her fists so hard her nails dug into her palms. Simple, naive. Her whole life had been nothing but work and home. She trusts him completely. Never checks. She remembered how 3 years ago John had indeed offered to take over all their finances. He'd said he wanted to lighten her load, that she worked hard enough, that it was no trouble for him. He was often near the bank anyway, and she believed him. She was grateful. She thought he was caring, thought it was love, but he was simply setting the stage. Setting the stage to control her money, her credit, her life. But what if she suddenly asks about the money? The woman asked again. What if she sees something leaving the account? She won't notice. John scoffed. "I've told you 100 times. She doesn't keep track of any of it. She gets her paycheck, gives me the card, and I give her cash for small things. Everything else is mine. Well, technically ours, but she doesn't even wonder how much is in there or what's being spent. As long as there's enough for food and utilities, she doesn't care." Eleanor bit her lip. This was the truth. The ugly, humiliating truth. She really hadn't been paying attention. She had trusted him, handed over her card, accepted cash for groceries in transit, and never asked questions. She thought that's what was expected. That's what families did when the man was the head of the household. But in reality, she had just handed him control of her life. "Fine." The woman drew out the word. "Just, let's get everything done quickly. I'm tired of hiding in corners. I want to see you normally, without constantly looking over my shoulder." "I know, baby, just hold on a little longer. After the trip, I'll talk to her, maybe even file for divorce. It depends on how it goes. If I can split the condo fairly, so I get the bigger share, then I'm definitely leaving." "You're serious?" Hope sparked in the woman's voice. "As serious as I can be, but it takes time. The condo is in both our names. Bought during the marriage. By law, it's 50-50, but I think I can maneuver it so I get 2/3. I just need to find a smart lawyer and play my cards right." The recording continued. Eleanor sat watching the phone screen where the seconds ticked by. 30:45, 1 minute, 1.5, 2 minutes, and 32 seconds. Every word was burned into her memory. Every phrase was a nail in the coffin of their marriage. She didn't cry. Tears wouldn't come. There was only a cold, hollow feeling inside, as if something important, something alive, had been ripped out by the roots. "Okay, let's go," the woman said. "I still need to look at that dress, the red one I saw in the window. Let's go, let's go. I'll buy you a dress that will make everyone jealous, and shoes to match, and a clutch. There's plenty for everything. Don't you worry." The curtain of the adjacent fitting room rustled. Eleanor stopped the recording and saved the file. 2.5 minutes. More than 150 seconds of his own words. Proof. She slowly rose from the poof. Her legs felt like cotton, but she forced herself to stand. She took off the coat, hung it back up, put on her jacket, grabbed her purse, checked that the phone was in her pocket, took a deep breath, exhaled, then pulled back her fitting room curtain, and stepped out. John stood a few feet away from her. Beside him was a fair-skinned woman, Tanya, in her late 20s, wearing a short black dress and high heels, bright makeup, red lipstick, long manicured nails, gold hoop earrings, beautiful, young, well-maintained. She was laughing at something, head thrown back, and John was looking at her with a smile Eleanor hadn't seen in a very long time. Eleanor took a step forward, slowly, deliberately. John turned at the sound of her steps and froze. The smile vanished from his face as if it had been wiped clean. His eyes widened, his mouth slightly open. He paled, literally. His face turned waxy, as if all the blood had been drained instantly. Tanya also fell silent, darting her eyes from Eleanor to John and back. Eleanor, he finally choked out. His voice was husky, unfamiliar. What are you doing here? Eleanor looked at him calmly, very calmly, a long, examining look, as if seeing him for the first time. Then she held up her phone, the screen still illuminated, showing the saved audio file with the timestamp. 2.5 minutes. I recorded it, she said quietly, almost a whisper. But in that silence, the word rang out like a gunshot. John froze. If he had been pale before, now he was ash-gray. His lips trembled. What? Recorded what? He mumbled, though the look on his face showed he understood perfectly. Tanya took a step back, her eyes darting between them. Eleanor said nothing. She simply stood and stared at her husband, at the man she had lived with for 8 years, whom she had trusted, whom she had loved, and who had turned out to be someone she didn't know at all. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. She passed the associate who was asking about the coat, if she liked it, if she was going to buy it. Eleanor didn't answer. She walked past the racks, past the displays, past the mirrors, without looking back. Her steps were firm, her back straight. Behind her, she heard John's voice, confused, frightened, almost pleading. Eleanor, Eleanor, wait, Eleanor, stop, let's talk. It's not what you think. She didn't stop, didn't turn around. She just walked forward through the store to the escalator, down to the exit. The automatic doors slid open. The cold evening air hit her face. There was a knot in her throat, but she didn't allow herself to cry. Only when she was in the taxi and it pulled away did Eleanor allow herself to exhale. Her hands were still shaking. She looked at the phone in her hand. The audio file was there, saved, recorded, the proof that her life had just collapsed, and at the same time, the proof that she now knew the truth. Eleanor entered the condo and locked the door with all the deadbolts. Her hands were still trembling as she kicked off her shoes and hung her jacket on the hook in the foyer. The condo was quiet, empty, cold. She had left that morning without turning up the heat. Now this silence felt alien, as if she hadn't come home, but into the set of her former life. She walked into the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and only then felt herself completely break. The knot in her throat swelled, her breathing became ragged. Tears streamed down her face, bitter, burning. Eleanor covered her face with her hands and wept, uninhibited, sobbing like a child. 8 years. 8 years of life with a man she turned out not to know at all. 8 years of trust, care, and shared plans. She remembered meeting him at a mutual friend's birthday party. John had seemed reliable, calm, serious, not the type to speak without thinking. He courted her beautifully. Flowers, movies, evening strolls. A year later, he proposed. 6 months after that, they had a modest but warm wedding with close friends and family. And now this, alone in her name, a mistress, lies about business trips, plans for divorce and condo division, and his voice, careless, mocking, she won't know the difference. Eleanor wiped her tears with the back of her hand, stood up, and went to the closet. She needed to compose herself. She needed to think. Tears wouldn't solve anything. She opened the bottom drawer of the dresser where they kept important documents. She pulled out a folder marked important. Inside were their passports, their marriage certificate, the condo deed, and some old statements. Eleanor dumped everything onto the table and started sorting through it. Her passport, John's passport, the marriage license, the condo purchase agreement. Where else could the papers be? She remembered that John always stacked certain envelopes in the top drawer of his desk. Before, she had never gone through his things, believing everyone should have their privacy. But this was no time for delicacy. Eleanor walked to the desk and opened the drawer. Inside were pens, notebooks, receipts, paperclips, and a sealed white envelope. She picked it up, turned it over. Nothing was written on the envelope. She tore it open and pulled out the sheets. Eleanor picked up her phone, found the bank's number on their website, and called. Long rings, then an automated voice offering to press numbers to select a service. She pressed 0 to connect with an operator. Good evening, Fidelity Bank. My name is Denise. How may I help you? A pleasant female voice asked. Good evening. My name is Eleanor Vance. I want to check on a loan that may have been taken out in my name. I can check that for you. Please provide your social security number and date of birth. Eleanor dictated the information. A pause. The sound of keys clicking on the other side. Yes, there is indeed a consumer loan taken out in your name. The amount is $45,000. The date of issue was October 23rd, 3 days ago. 3 days ago. Eleanor closed her eyes. It was very recent. He hadn't even had time to spend all the money. Tell me, can I dispute this loan? The thing is, I didn't sign for it. The signature is not mine. I understand your situation. In that case, you need to come to a bank branch with your ID and file a fraud report. We will conduct a signature analysis. If it is confirmed that the signature is forged, the loan will be annulled, and the case will be handed over to law enforcement. How quickly can this be done? We accept the report on any business day. The analysis usually takes between 5 and 10 business days. Come in first thing in the morning, ideally right when we open, to avoid a wait. Okay, thank you. And sure enough, on Thursday evening, the detective called. He introduced himself as Detective Johnson and asked her to come in for testimony the next morning. Eleanor agreed. On Friday morning, she took a couple of hours off work and drove to the precinct. The detective met her in a small office with bare walls, a metal desk, and 2 chairs. He was a young man in his 30s with attentive eyes and a serious expression. Please sit down, Miss Vance. Tell me everything in sequence. Eleanor spoke for nearly an hour, recounting the entire story from the moment she stepped into the fitting room to the discovery of the loan papers. Detective Johnson listened intently, his fingers steepled under his chin, only interrupting to clarify a date or a name. He took the phone and, with her permission, made a copy of the damning audio file. The evidence is compelling, Ms. Vance, he said finally, sliding her phone back across the table. The forged signature, coupled with this recording, makes for an open and shut case for fraud and identity theft. We'll be issuing a warrant for your husband's arrest. The word arrest sent a fresh, cold shock through her system. This was really happening. The man she had shared a bed with for 8 years was going to be handcuffed and processed. A part of her, the part that still remembered the man who had proposed to her under the stars, recoiled at the thought. But the larger, more rational part, the part that had heard his mocking laughter, knew it was necessary. Thank you, Detective, she said, her voice steady. As she stood to leave, he added, he will likely be granted bail, given it's a non-violent crime and he has no prior record. But the conditions will almost certainly prohibit him from contacting you. If he does, call us immediately. Eleanor nodded. The reality of her new life as a victim and a plaintiff settling around her like a heavy cloak. Back at Maria's apartment, she tried to resume some semblance of normalcy. She went to work, she ate meals, she slept fitfully. The call came 3 days later. It was Detective Johnson. Ms. Vance, John Vance, was taken into custody this morning at his place of work. He did not resist. He's been processed and has already posted bail. His arraignment is scheduled for next month. Eleanor's knees felt weak, and she sat down heavily on Maria's sofa. I see, as expected, a restraining order is now in effect. He cannot come within 500 feet of you, your place of work, or your sister's residence. He's been ordered to surrender his passport. The next 2 weeks were a strange, liminal period. The initial storm of activity had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. Eleanor, with Maria's unwavering support, found a small, furnished studio apartment not far from her job. It was bland and beige, a far cry from the condo she had lovingly decorated, but it was hers, and it was safe. Moving her things was a surgical operation. She went to the condo only when she knew John would be at work, with Maria acting as a lookout. She took only her clothes, her books, and her personal items. She left behind the furniture, the wedding photos, the shared life. She also hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah Jenkins who specialized in divorce and financial fraud. The criminal case will run its course, Sarah explained, her glasses perched on the end of her nose as she reviewed the police report. Our job is to ensure that in the divorce, his actions have severe financial consequences. We'll be suing for the entirety of the marital assets, citing gross misconduct and fraud. That condo, we're going for 100% equity for you. He can explain to a judge why he should be left with nothing but the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal fees. The firmness in Sarah's voice was a balm to Eleanor's soul. For the first time, she felt she had a true champion, someone who was fighting for her without sentiment or pity. The calm was shattered one evening as she was walking home from the grocery store. A figure detached itself from the shadows near her apartment building's entrance. Eleanor, she froze. It was John. He looked haggard, his clothes rumpled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and desperation. He stood just beyond the 500-foot marker, a technicality that felt like a cruel joke. "You can't be here, John," she said, her voice cold, her grip tightening on her grocery bag. "Please, just 5 minutes. I lost my job, Eleanor, the arrest. The news got out. They said I was a reputational risk." He let out a bitter laugh. "Tanya's gone. She cleaned out the joint account we had, the one with the loan money, and disappeared. I have nothing left." A part of her, the part that had built a life with him, should have felt a pang of sympathy, but all she felt was a distant, weary contempt. "That's not my problem," she said. "You made your choices." "Choices," he spat, his desperation curdling into anger. "You think you're so high and mighty. You recorded me. You set me up. You were always so passive, so quiet. I never thought you had it in you to be so vicious." Eleanor took a step forward, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. She was no longer the woman he could manipulate. "No, John, I was always strong. You just never bothered to look. You were too busy seeing what you could take from me." She held his gaze, her own steady and clear. "Now, get away from my home, or my next call will be to Detective Johnson. And I doubt the judge will look kindly on you violating a restraining order before your arraignment." His shoulders slumped in defeat. The anger drained from his face, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He turned without another word and shuffled away into the gathering dusk. Eleanor watched him go until he was out of sight. Then she walked into her building, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, triumphant certainty. The following month was a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The arraignment was a brief, formal affair where John, through his public defender, pled not guilty, a futile gesture. Everyone knew. The divorce proceedings, however, were where the real battle was fought. Sarah Jenkins was a pitbull. She presented the evidence, the audio recording, the bank's confirmation of the forged loan, the police report, and even a statement from a private investigator she'd hired, who confirmed John's numerous business trips with Tanya. John's lawyer argued for a standard 50-50 split of assets. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, was having none of it. "Mr. Vance," she said, peering over her glasses, "you have systematically defrauded your wife, destroyed her credit, and betrayed the marital covenant in the most profound way. This court will not reward such behavior." The ruling was a total victory for Eleanor. She was awarded full ownership of the condo, all the money in their savings account, what little John hadn't spent, and spousal support for 2 years to help her get back on her feet. John was left responsible for his own legal fees and the debts he had accrued in his own name. He was a financially broken man. The criminal trial was almost an afterthought. Faced with the mountain of evidence, John changed his plea to guilty just before the trial was set to begin. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and was ordered to attend financial counseling. The judge made it clear that any violation of his probation, especially the restraining order, would result in immediate jail time. When it was all over, Eleanor sat in Sarah Jenkins's office, the final divorce decree in her hands. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked, a genuine smile on her face. Eleanor looked out the window at the city sprawling below. "I'm going to sell the condo," she said. "There are too many ghosts there. Then, I think I'm going to take a trip. Maybe to Cancun." A small, wry smile touched her lips. On my own dime. 6 months later, Eleanor stood on a balcony overlooking a turquoise sea. The Cancun sun was warm on her skin. She was alone, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel lonely. She felt whole. She had used the money from the condo sale to pay off her remaining debts and had taken a portion for this trip, a celebration of her freedom. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria. "Thinking of you. Hope you're living it up. P.S. Heard through the grapevine that John is driving for a rideshare service. Karma's a reliable navigator, isn't she?" Eleanor smiled, a real unforced smile that reached her eyes. She didn't feel hatred for John anymore, only a distant pity. He was a chapter in her life, a painful one, but a chapter that was firmly closed. She looked out at the horizon, at the vast, endless ocean, and felt an echo of the woman she had been, in that fitting room, terrified, paralyzed, heartbroken. But that woman had found a core of steel she never knew she possessed. That woman had recorded the truth, faced the betrayal, and rebuilt her life from the ashes. The echo was no longer one of pain, but of strength. It was the sound of her own voice, finally speaking up for herself. And it was a sound that would guide her for the rest of her life. She took a deep breath of the salty air, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt completely and utterly at peace.